The Nintendo Switch has one of the greatest libraries Nintendo has ever produced. But if someone started collecting today, where would they begin? This isn't a list of the rarest games. This isn't a list of the most expensive games. It also isn't a list of my all-time favourite games. Some are obvious. Some deserve far more attention. But every one of these tells part of the story of why the Nintendo Switch became such an incredible console to collect for. This is a list of 20 Nintendo Switch games which I believe needs to be on every Nintendo Switch collector's shelf. I think if we're going to talk about games that defined the Nintendo Switch, I think there's a very important one we need to start off with. This is the title that not only released with the Nintendo Switch, it also proved that Nintendo were not only going to reinvent themselves with a new hybrid console, but they were also going to reinvent one of the greatest franchises of all time. Of course, we're talking here about Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild deserves to be mentioned up there with some of the greats of all time. It took the Zelda classic formula and, well, it done a 180 with it, bringing us a massive open world with tons of secrets to find and a very lengthy single-player campaign. I sank over 100 hours in this and I'm still going back to it and finding new things. There's secrets to be found under every rock, across every mountain and over every stream. And of course it has its detractors. The weapons durability system isn't particularly the best and some of the dungeons, well, they're a little bit forgettable. However, Breath of the Wild just sucked us into the world of Hyrule and gave us an absolutely huge campaign and a world that you could get lost into. Honestly, I grew up with Zelda. I love just about every single Zelda game for their own merits, but Breath of the Wild just stands out as one of the greatest games of all time. And of course, well, we can't just talk about Breath of the Wild without talking about its sequel, Tears of the Kingdom. Now, this is the same map as Breath of the Wild, but we get a huge sky system, we get an underground system, we get more meaty dungeons, and just about everything that was put into Breath of the Wild is expanded on, with a huge crafting system that honestly, I've never seen something quite like it. Honestly, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they redefined an open world for me. And it's interesting going back to other titles which do have open worlds and kind of looking at them and just thinking, oh, this isn't quite as good as I quite remember it. But of course, Zelda also brought back one of the greatest Zelda games of all time with a new coat of paint, Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch. Now, I've said many times on the channel how much of a game Link's Awakening is. It's one of my favourite games of all time, and if you're wanting for a more traditional Zelda classic title, this one's for you. Absolutely beautiful world, reimagined on the Nintendo Switch in more of a toy box style mode. An absolutely fantastic title worth adding to your shelves. Of course, Nintendo being Nintendo, they look at games with families in mind, and what game talks about families as much as throwing a blue shell at them when they're coasting in first place? Of course, we're talking about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, this is a deluxe version of the original Mario Kart 8 that released on the Wii. It's got a lot more tracks, it's got a lot more extra doodads, a few extra characters, a lot of the stuff that was in the expansion pack. And of course we got a further expansion packs introducing more and more stuff on here. Why is this brought up? Well, of course, this is one of the huge Nintendo sellers. It's one of those games that if you've got people around, pop in Mario Kart 8, you're going to have an absolutely frantic, fantastic time. And interestingly enough, for the Nintendo Switch, I don't think that there's a huge amount of games that really have that whole family bonding of four of you sitting around a couch, all playing on one game, trying to destroy each other. Mario Kart 8 does that, and is just a very enjoyable game on top of it. While we're talking about Mario, let's look at his debut game on the Nintendo Switch. And honestly, it's been a while since we had a big, massive 3D Mario at this point. Mario Galaxy 2 still remains one of my favourite games of all time, but Mario Odyssey, Well, that took things to a new level, didn't it? Of course, we have our different worlds, we've got our different abilities, and the new capability of being able to take control of enemies and allies and do different things. This felt Mario at its most experimental. It felt like they were trying to push Mario into different directions, while also keeping the 3D platformer very much the same. And if we talk about different directions, let's not also talk about Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Now, I'm going to be honest, since probably Super Mario World, Wario Land, I've kind of fell off a little bit on 2D Mario. The new Super Mario series was kind of okay, but Wonder, that tried to do things a little bit different. We have the classic 2D Mario, but we have some wondrous things, and the Wonder Flower, which kind of makes things a little bit more strange, and there's a lot of stuff here that kind of just feels like this is 2D Mario at its best it can be. It's a very interesting installation into the franchise, for one that, like I said, I'd soured a little bit on 2D Mario, but this felt absolutely fresh and it felt like an absolutely fantastic inclusion to the 2D Mario world. This felt more than just another 2D Mario. It felt like 2D Mario pushed in a new and vibrant direction. Of course, there's a franchise that just encapsulates everything that has came before it, and just about every Nintendo franchise you can imagine. That's right, everyone is here. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Honestly, this is one of the defining games for me, simply not because it's just another Smash Bros. Game. It's another Smash Bros. Game that had so much hype behind it. You guys that were there for it, remember when we had all of those incredible trailers that introduced Banjo and Kazooie, Sephiroth, Pyra and Mithra, even Sora, and this just had everybody. It had everybody in this absolutely fantastic package. Of course, when we had Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS, there were a lot more limitations. We lost Ice Climbers, we lost Snake, and a lot of characters were brought back as DLC. Everybody is here in here, and this just is not only a love letter to the Nintendo Switch, not only a love letter to Nintendo, but a love letter to gaming as a whole. So many different characters, so many different franchises brought into the fight, and this one remains one of the best games on the console. Of course, along with our key franchises such as Zelda and Mario, we had a lot of installments, very solid installments into classic franchises. And one that was such a joy to see come back was 2D Metroid with Metroid Dread. Now, we did have Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS at the end of its lifespan. However, Metroid Dread was the next generation game that I think a lot of us really were hoping for. It had been so many years since Metroid Fusion, and Metroid Dread proved the franchise can still go strong with its 2D aspects. And honestly, this is one of those ones where it's difficult, but it's fair and difficult. And honestly, for me, it was pretty chilling. Having those robots chase you through some of these environments, having some tough but fair combat. This is one of those games that I expected to bounce off, but honestly, I found myself loving more and more. Metroid Dread is an absolutely fantastic addition to the Metroid franchise, and if you want something a little bit more difficult than your Mario or your Zelda, this one needs to be into the collection. While we're talking about Metroid, let's not forget Metroid Prime Remastered, absolutely fantastic remaster of one of the greatest games of all time. Another one well worth adding into the collection if you can find it. Another title that had an absolutely fantastic installment was Luigi's Mansion 3. Now, Luigi's Mansion was an initial GameCube launch title and, in my opinion, got overly hated when it first came out, but has remained a favourite nostalgic title for me. Luigi's Mansion 3 expands on that and just makes everything all the more better. There were a few hiccups in my opinion with Luigi's Mansion 2. The aspect of being on a 3DS game and having to be more portable so things were more mission based kind of worked, but not necessarily for me. This brought back a lot of the big things. The portrait ghost in a hotel, added things such as Luigi. Honestly, this is just Luigi's Mansion refined to its core in an absolutely fantastic, beautiful Honestly, this is one of the best looking titles on the console. This one deserves to be in your collection. If you like Luigi's Mansion, if you want something a little bit more fun, a little bit spooky, not really scary though, this one is such a fantastic release. Another game that got absolutely refined to its core and improved on was Pikmin 4. Now, Pikmin actually had a pretty good stint on the Switch. We had re-releases of Pikmin 3 from the Wii U, but also Pikmin 1 and 2 in a deluxe edition. Pikmin 4, however, took everything from Pikmin and just expanded it. We had our new little dog companion, Nowachi, who just made the game that little bit better. The game itself is challenging enough, but it's not something that I would say you would breeze through. But it's also not on the same level as, say, Metroid Dread. What you have here is Pikmin absolutely refined to the core, with absolute beautiful visuals, fun combat, and an addictive, and I mean addictive, gameplay loop. This is one of my favourite games, and honestly really boosted Pikmin up from being one of those franchises that I liked to one of those franchises that I love. I absolutely can't wait for Pikmin 5. This one deserves to be in the collection, along with the other Pikmin games, just for completionist sake. But honestly, an absolutely fantastic addition. Another game that I think went strength to strength on the Nintendo Switch was Splatoon. Now, Splatoon 1 was one of those titles that came out towards the end of the Wii U cycle, and we got Splatoon 2 very quickly in the Switch life cycle, and to be honest, it kind of felt like it was pretty much an upgrade. And this again also feels like an upgrade, but it's still a really enjoyable title. If you want Nintendo's foray into the deathmatch style games, this is the one you need to look into. The campaign itself is meaty enough that you can enjoy it, and it's one of those titles that you can always find an online playstyle. Personally, I love Salmon Run, which means I'm going to be very much excited for Splatoon Raiders, which comes out, which is one where you kind of have to defeat a lot of enemies, and kind of when they're trying to kind of, it's like King of the Hill kind of thing, where they're swarming on you, and you've got to like kill them and get like the salmon eggs and come back. It's a really enjoyable title, and the online in here, absolutely fantastic. One of those games where I think you can kind of be good enough, even if you're a newbie, you can kind of still do your part by just, you know, painting the walls and stuff like that, not necessarily going after the competition. It's got a very gentle curve into playing it, but I think the top tier is something that's obtainable, in my opinion. It's one of those games that Japan has really picked up on and seems to be very beloved in the Japanese community, and I can definitely see why. A very enjoyable game, very enjoyable online, and I don't really like playing online games, so if I'm actually recommending an online game, it's probably something I can definitely see is worth looking into. Definitely one for the shelf if you like your multiplayer based games. While I have you, could you do me a favour? If you like this video, leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And let me know in the comments, what games would you recommend to a collector if they're starting out, needs to be on their collection? Something that is absolutely personal to you. Something that you think everybody should at least try. There's fantastic games out there, and I think 20 is just not nearly enough for a video. Another title that got an absolutely fantastic addition to was Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Now, did you know this is actually the first foray into 3D worlds for Kirby? That's right. It's one of those franchises that for some reason I just already assumed had a proper 3D edition. Nope. All the games were 2D, and yeah, that's interesting because this is a very good addition to the Kirby franchise. A franchise that I like but I don't particularly love. I love this one. Honestly, it's just a very much an enjoy to play it. We've got a lot of Kirby's abilities in here. The 3D environments aren't too big that you get lost in them, but they're enjoyable enough to hide a lot of secrets. There is a lot of fun to be had with this one, and honestly, I think it's one of those ones that kind of was very popular and very enjoyable, went, and a lot of people kind of forgot about. It's one of those ones that I definitely recommend people picking up if they want more 3D Mario and aren't particularly enjoying the bigger open worlds of Odyssey and a little bit too constrained by 2D Mario's worlds. absolutely fantastic addition to the collection. One of the things that Nintendo has been fantastic with is bringing back classic franchises, or bringing back classic versions of franchises. And one of the ones we need to talk about is Emio the Smiling Man. Now, this initially was hyped up as Nintendo's mature game, and then people were like, oh, it's a Famicom Detective Club game. But honestly, this is a very enjoyable. I'm not huge into visual novels. I like Ace Attorney, I like Danganronpa. I never really played a full-on visual novel until this, and honestly, I'm addicted to them now. Absolutely thrilling, and the emotional story that you go through in here is honestly top tier. A very fantastic entry into a long-forgotten franchise. Another franchise that I think did have a bit of a benefit on the Nintendo Switch was Paper Mario. Now, we did have Paper Mario the Origami King, and Paper Mario's been in a weird situation in that people love the first two, especially the Thousand Year Door. However, since then it moved more into being more of platformer based stuff, and then we kind of been strange entries such as Sticker Star, and we got a remaster of the Thousand Year Door, and honestly this brought the fantastic The Thousand Year Door to more and more people. It nuked the obscene price of the GameCube version and give us some nice quality of life improvements. If you want your first foray into RPGs, Thousand Year Door or Paper Mario RPG, an absolute definite inclusion into the collection. And of course, we can't talk about RPGs without, well, the biggest JRPG of all time, Pokemon. Pokemon Legends Arceus was one that I wasn't sure whether or not to put on the list. Of course, it's got a lot of detractors. Visually, it's not the best, but this game was an absolute joy to play through, and honestly, this is probably the most fun I've actually had with Pokemon in a long time. It strips a lot of things back. The battle system, not great. The catcher mechanic, absolutely fantastic. You are in the wilds. Pokemon are in the wilds. You are having to sneak up. You are having to trap Pokemon. You are having to actually throw the ball, and the satisfying clunk when it hits, you know, a Snorlax on the back of the head and captures it. Absolutely fantastic. It had some absolutely hilarious moments as well. Again, the Snorlax just sleeping, they're just jumping up and just like destroying somebody with Hyper Beam. Honestly, this is one of those games I just couldn't put down, and one of the very few Pokemon games where I actually have went and caught every single one of them. The first time since Pokemon Red, actually. And honestly, this is one I would happily go back to time and time again. If you want a Pokemon addition to your library, this is the one to go for. And while we talk about Pokemon and JRPGs, let's talk about JRPGs, because the Nintendo Switch has been a juggernaut for JRPGs. Now, I've said this is for games for everybody, maybe not so much, but you know what? I think that these games are worth at least trying, especially this franchise. Xenoblade Chronicles. Now, Xenoblade Chronicles was my favourite Wii game. It's also one of my favourite 3DS games, and also one of my favourite Nintendo Switch games. The Definitive Edition is absolutely fantastic. It just makes things look so much better. The grand scale of climbing up these giant titans that are also the world, fantastic. It just made things just look so much better. And of course we had Xenoblade Chronicles 3, probably one of my most favourite emotional games of all time. I'm going to be honest, this game had me in tears by the end of it, and not many games managed to do that. Of course we had Xenoblade Chronicles X, which had its Definitive Edition, my favourite game on the Wii U, one of my favourite games I played last year. Still an absolutely fantastic world, and it's interesting enough, if you like Breath of the Wild, this is one of the ones that comes close to that. Of course it's got its own little world, it's not Breath of the Wild as open as Breath of the Wild, but the world, so many secrets, and eventually you get a giant mech that you can fly through it. Fantastic. Of course we also had as well Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna, which Torna is DLC, but it's a 30-hour DLC. That's right, you're getting a full game as DLC, but it also did have its own, you know, physical release. And Xenoblade Chronicles 2, this was the one that opened the door for JRPGs and is still an absolutely fantastic inclusion into the franchise. A lot of waifu stuff in here. Xenoblade Chronicles has been the gold standard for JRPGs for me, but you know what franchise is also very, very close to it? The Trails of series. And we have Trails in the Sky first. We also have Trails to Azure, we have Trails from Zero, we have Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4. We have just about every single Trails game released on the platform, apart from Cold Steel 1 and 2. We don't have 2, that's coming later this year onto the Switch 2. We don't have 3, which I'm assuming is going to come straight onto the Switch 2 next year. But honestly, this game is absolutely massive. I played this game a few years ago, interesting enough, straight after Final Fantasy 14. I played that game for about 100 hours, wanted a proper JRPG, went into this, absolutely loved it. This is obviously a remake of the original game to kind of get more people into it, and a fantastic addition it is. Trails franchise is basically the One Piece of JRPGs, a huge connecting story over what I believe is about 12 or 13 games at this point. Characters come back into later arcs. Each NPC has their own story arc. That's right, every single NPC in these titles has their own story arc that takes place across the games. Some characters are well developed, and the battle system changes with each story arc as well. Honestly, now is one of the best times to get into the Trails series, with Trails in the Sky first and second coming up. A fantastic franchise, definitely worth adding into the collection. Another franchise that we had was Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, I genuinely think this is an absolutely fantastic entry point into the Fire Emblem franchises, but I'm going to be honest, this is one of the least favourite Fire Emblem games I've played. So why is it still on this list? Well, it does a lot of things, I wouldn't say different, but it expands on a lot of things. It took a lot of things from other franchises like Persona, which had, you know, like the day system where you would go around school, you go around the city and stuff like that, and chat to different people, do different things with that. It has all of that, along with the turn-based, classic, fantastic combat that Fire Emblem already has. And there's so many different routes. In the base game, I believe there's 4 routes. Yeah, I did one of them. So I even went back and done some of the other routes. I did one of them. And honestly, there's still a lot here. If you like the kind of waifu, husbando kind of thing, there's a lot in here for you guys. There's a lot of very charming characters, a lot of interesting characters. And I think they do get developed in a way that is a bit better than titles we had with stuff like Fire Emblem Awaken and Fates, as much as I love them. While I don't think this is the best Fire Emblem has ever offered, it is still an absolutely fantastic addition to the franchise, and one worth adding to your collection and try and see what the fuss is about. Of course, we had another fantastic franchise that isn't Fire Emblem, but I think is definitely worth adding to your Switch collection. Unicorn Overlord. Now, this one again has your kind of like your war-based system in which you are kind of the lord, and you kind of have to recruit all of these different people into your company and fight enemies and slowly take back the world. I really enjoyed this one. This is one of those ones where I really enjoyed it. The combat was absolutely satisfying. It was one of those games where the visual style was just beautiful. There's a lot of really likable characters. There's a huge amount of characters to recruit, which is actually the biggest detractor, is that you can't use every single recruitable character in your party. You've very much got to pick and choose, and by the last third of the game, you kind of already have a roster and more interesting characters get put in. Combat, so satisfying. Such a very enjoyable game, and one that I think is deserving on more people's collections. And if we're going to talk about JRPGs, let's talk about one of those great RPGs that honestly is just fantastic from start to finish. Dragon Quest 11. Now, Dragon Quest 11 takes everything from the franchise so far and just makes a pure enjoyable experience. It's interesting because Dragon Quest is one of those ones where it's actually stayed very true to its roots. It's just refined things over and over again and give us very different experiences with each and every installment, while also feeling extremely familiar. Unlike franchises such as Final Fantasy, which has reinvented itself time and time again, Dragon Quest kind of keeps itself true to its roots. And in this game, 100 plus hours, this is everything that the Dragon Quest franchise can be. Honestly, if people ask about getting into JRPGs, this is always the one I recommend. If they've got a Switch, if they've got a PlayStation. If they've just got a Switch, I would maybe also recommend Super Mario RPG or Paper Mario, but Dragon Quest 11 is everything the franchise can be and is absolutely fantastic. Some of the best turn-based battles I've ever played in this game, despite being very traditional. Of course, with the Nintendo Switch, we need to talk about the indies, and honestly, indie support for Nintendo Switch has been absolutely fantastic. I could probably make a full-on video just talking about indie games essential for your collection, and it was very difficult to get down to just a handful. I mean, at the end of the day, indies, physical games, I always look at an indie physical game as the very culmination of one's hopes and dreams put into a physical cartridge. I mean, you could say that just about any physical game really, but indie games, smaller team, smaller budget, can do some absolutely fantastic things. Stardew Valley takes everything from Harvest Moon and just makes it perfect. The visuals, they just look nice, a nice little throwback to earlier generations, and the gameplay loop is oddly satisfying. It's one of those games where I kind of felt, oh, I've played Harvest Moon to death, will this give us much new? It certainly did. And the fact that this came on a very, very nice collection is just perfect. One of those games that I think will appeal to a lot more people than they initially may think. Absolutely addicting, very charming, constantly gets fantastic updates that makes the game bigger and bigger and bigger. Once you pick this up, you probably will have very little reason to go back to stuff like Story of Seasons or Harvest Moon, which I can't complain about. Another indie game that broke the mold for me was Balatro. Honestly, I'm not a card game person. I've never really played poker and stuff like that, and whenever it comes as a side quest or spin-off in games, I'm always kind of like, I'm not really fussed about this. Balatro was addicting though. It's one of those games that kind of, you sit down 6 o'clock at night, next thing you know, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're still wanting to give it another try. Honestly, they turned poker into just an addicting mess of a game. Honestly, it's one of those games where you just sit down, play it time and time again and never get bored with it. Absolutely challenging, absolutely addicting, but one of those games that just was a fantastic, fantastic release. And much like a lot of indie games, it came with a lot of nice little extras. For example, this one came with a deck of little cards, well, 10 cards, a very small deck, so you can make your own real life Balatro stuff, I suppose. And of course, the final game is one that, again, this encapsulates the indie world. UFO 50. You know I was going to talk about this one at some point. UFO 50 is a collection of 50 games for the imaginary system, the UFO, and tells a chronological story of that made-up console. There are 50 fantastic games in here from fantastic indie developers who also made the Spelunky series. This is one of those titles that you can just go back to time and time again, try something different. You know, you want a JRPG that is also a golf game, UFO 50. Do you want a submarine Metroid game? UFO 50. Do you want a weird Metroid type game? UFO 50. Do you want a shoot 'em up bunny game? UFO 50. Do you want a koala puzzle game? UFO 50. Honestly, this game has just about something for everybody. Do you want a little strategy game that's also about ants? UFO 50. Honestly, it's one of those games that I picked up and I can't stop talking about it. In my opinion, this is an absolute essential game for the collection, just because of how much is in here and how much you can appreciate some of the indie roots, and not only indie roots, but some gaming roots as well. Well, that's 20 Nintendo Switch games that I think need to be in everybody's Nintendo Switch collection. Now, of course, stuff like JRPGs aren't going to appeal to everybody, but these are JRPGs definitely worth playing. And I'm sure there's plenty more titles that I forgot that probably should be in the collection. Let me know in the comments, what games do you think need to get added into the collection? And if you like this, leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel. There's plenty more Nintendo Switch content, GameCube content, N64 content coming very shortly. Thanks for coming, and thanks again for staying. Goodbye.